Diane, record, please.
Okay. This is a special meeting of the Board of Selectmen on Tuesday, October 15th. It is the 15th, right? 17th. I'm watching.
You had the day right, though.
The 17th. And the purpose of this meeting tonight is to interview our final three candidates for the position of town administrator. So our first candidate is Aaron Burke, and we'll start with you. So why don't you tell us a little bit about, briefly, we've read your resume and stuff, but a little bit about what you've been doing.
Sure. My focus professionally for the last 11 years has been that of an attorney. I do primarily real estate law. It is buying and selling of residential houses. I do some land use work. I do some eviction work for some existing clients that are investors, property investors. In addition to that, I've been involved in different facets of town government, everything from school committee to Board of Selectmen. I was a town moderator. I was on a zoning board of appeals, and it's really my passion. I enjoy legal work, but I really, look forward to this opportunity to try to transition from what I'm doing into becoming a full-time town administrator for a town. And I think for me, Dayton was a great fit. I live in Lakeville. Dayton reminds me a lot of Lakeville maybe 30 years ago, in terms of
What's the population of Lakeville?
It's a little over 11,000.
Yeah, okay. All right.
And so that's really what brought me to this point, was that I think that my passion really is municipal government, and to have an opportunity to get involved in it on a full-time basis really is exciting for me.
Can I ask him a question based on that? So I do see here, you've been heavily involved in town government before. In terms of just raw administrative work, do you have any administrative experience?
Specific to being, working for your municipality, no.
I didn't mean so much, just like in general. It could have been private sector.
It's funny, I think a lot of what I do professionally is somewhat administrative, and so I have systems that I've developed for the sake of organizing my files and organizing my time in terms of setting up meetings. And real estate is really kind of a moving target in terms of when dates happen. Things are always changing, so I really have to be well organized to keep track of all of that. I might cycle through $25 or $30 million out of my IOLTA account in terms of transactions in a year, so I have to be very meticulous in terms of my record keeping, and I have to balance that account down to the penny every month for the sake of maintaining my license. So I get office work, and I'm good at it, but specific to a municipality,
But so this is your law office of Aaron Burke. I would suspect that you're, maybe I used the wrong word, you're essentially the manager of that
well,
practice?
I'm more or less a one-man show.
Okay.
I do have some administrative support help for certain aspects of my practice, but by and large, I carry the lion's share of the work from start to finish. And I prefer that because it gives me control over the process that a lot of attorneys don't have. And honestly, the folks that appreciate that, the real estate agents and folks that appreciate that, are the ones I want to work with anyway, because they tend to be the same way. So it kind of works out in terms of the types of clients that I get and get to work with. So.
Do you have a town administrator in Lakeville?
We do.
And how many members on the Board of Selectmen?
There are 3.
And you have a separate Board of Health,
Yes.
appointed or elected?
It's elected. We recently just usurped some power back from that Board of Health for the sake of appointing their health agent. And we did that because we wanted to we didn't want to have the health agent report directly to the Board of Health. We wanted to give them the advantage, much like the Board of Selectmen has with the town administrator, we wanted the Board of Health agent in that office to report to somebody on a day-to-day basis. So what we did was we created a Director of Inspectional Services, who's our building commissioner, and the health agent reports to the building commissioner on a day-to-day basis for the sake of streamlining that office. Another advantage to that is that the customer or the client or resident can come in and they can visit the board of, visit the building commissioner and do all of the permitting in one shot.
So you don't have to run all over the place.
Exactly.
Now, you
yeah.
talked about, under your Board of Selectmen experience, monitor and review the town budget of $25 million. Are you a full K-12 region?
Yes,
So the $25 million doesn't include schools,
correct.
like pretty much us. I mean, it's part of the town appropriation at town meeting, but once
Right.
appropriated,
It's gone.
They do
it.
Separate and distinct. Yeah, the school budget is roughly 35 million, and it's a full region between Lakeville and Freetown.
okay, and about your vocational region, who are you with?
Old Colony.
We'll call it.
So we're a member town at Old Colony, and that comprises roughly maybe another $1.7 million.
This is, this is the first town administrator we're going to have. So tell me your perception of what the relationship is between a Board of Selectmen and the town administrator.
My perception of what the ideal situation is that a town administrator really is a resource for your Board of Selectmen. I think that the process would be the same, or I'd like to see the process be the same with all of the issues that a Board of Selectmen would face. You as a board would identify an issue, you would research various ways of solving that problem, you'd put a plan in place, you'd fund that plan, and then you'd monitor the results. I think with the town administrator really needs to be the resource for the Board of Selectmen to arrive, or I should say, go through that process in a more streamlined fashion. I mean, obviously, you're gonna still determine what the issues are, but I think a town administrator can research different outcomes of that, which provide you with a lot more information to make a decision. Ideally, you arrive at the correct decision. The town administrator should be researching funding options for the sake of implementing that strategy. And then the town administrator should be implementing that strategy and to a large extent monitoring that strategy by reporting back to the Board of Selectmen. So I really think that that's really the role I see a town administrator taking.
So I don't need to spend as many hours here as I have then, if you're telling me. That's good.
I mean, I think to a lesser degree, you probably want to have some day-to-day oversight as well.
Yeah, right, yeah.
But I mean, by and large, if that's all you wanted, you wouldn't be necessarily hiring a town administrator. I think you want to focus on the higher level stuff.
Right, yeah. Well, I've said, I think, I view it as the Board of Selectmen is like the CEO, I mean, the Board of Directors of a corporation, and the town administrator like the CEO. So,
Sure.
The board provides direction based on, what, on a lot of things, town meeting, what we hear and what we want to move forward with, and then town administrator would move forward to implement that.
I see here you were a marketing manager, super cool. My question is, so we were living in the dark ages here a couple years ago, and we redid our, no disrespect to anyone, we redid our website, we got that up and running. We have a lot of social media, we send out mass emails when, things are coming up. Based on your experience as a marketing manager, do you see yourself as being able to help the town with that sort of communication and marketing to the residents?
Absolutely. I used to also work as a public relations associate as well, so I have a very firm grasp on professional communication in a public setting. So I think your website's great.
Oh, you looked. Yes.
Really, and actually Woody filled me in too a little bit about the impact you've had as a selectman in terms of
Hey,
technology, and
thank
I think that that's definitely a positive step. I think it's moving that way whether we like it or not, and I think once you immerse yourself in it, you realize you do like it, because it can make your life a lot easier. So I think exploring all of those options relative to technology and streamlining the delivery of services is very important.
Absolutely. Thank you.
One of the things you talked about in the questions, one of the questions you answered, you talked about smart growth. And when we compare, I use Freetown Lakeville because you are in a regional school district. Obviously, Dayton and Rehoboth are quite diverse as far as communities go. Now, is Freetown population-wise larger than Lakeville or smaller? Or are you about the even?
It's about the same. It's a little bit smaller.
Freetown is a little bit smaller?
Yes.
Okay. From what I see, Lakeville seems to be more, I'll say, attractive to business. You seem to have more things going on, especially on 105 where 79 comes down. There's a lot of building going on there because I know that the T-stop is there. And so when you look at that, obviously we're trying to attract industry to help us with taxes. And years ago when we had ICI on Main Street, and when we had Raytheon at Mount Hope, and we had Princess House, and we had the Taunton Dog Track, we had good tax base, and we also had good jobs in town. They're all gone. The Mount Hope, which housed Raytheon, it's got some small businesses in it, but nothing compared to Raytheon, or even General Bronze in its day. Princess House, the building is there, and but it's not the big business that Princess House was. They moved to the industrial park in town, and AstraZeneca bought out ICI and flattened it. There's trees and weeds down there. So what do you see from your experience, and from what I'm reading here, what do you see as far as your role in helping? We have an industrial development industrial commission that's trying to bring business in. So what do you see as your role as far as trying to attract business or commercial use or something like that?
Sure. Again, I think a town administrator really serves as a resource to a committee in that sense. I think if you have an economic development committee, or there's a committee in town that's researching different aspects of economic development, a town administrator would then be the facilitator of enacting whatever decision was made. Where and what type of business locates in a town is a very, very intimate decision for a town to make. And I know, like, for example, in Lakeville, where in 1959, when they enacted zoning, they determined where the commercial base of the town would be, and it was right along that 105 corridor. Well, one of the things we did was we expanded that zoning so that it wouldn't be the first 200 feet of a lot, it would be the entire lot, because that was really holding back that vision from ever coming to fruition. That was a big, big shock to the people of Lakeville so it took a lot of political activity, and a lot of meetings, honestly, was the big thing. We got out into the community and had several different meetings with all of the folks that lived along that region. So to sum up that experience, I think I would mirror that experience in Dayton. I would work with that group to determine where they wanted to focus, make sure that the town had an opportunity to be heard relative to whether they support a zoning change or development of a certain type, and then work to put in the bylaws, the zoning bylaw changes, or if you wanted to do a zoning overlay for the sake of like smart growth, work with the Department of Housing and Community Development. Those are the folks that oversee that. I'm familiar with that process, having done it in Lakeville, and we're actually trying to expand our smart growth district now. I just was meeting with those folks with the DCHD in Boston a week or two back with the Board of Selectmen, because 15 years ago, they had put in some commercial zoning that they thought would attract commercial development. Well, here we are 15 years later, and there's nothing. And a developer wants to do a 40B housing development. Well, we said to the developer, are you okay with us proposing a 40R overlay? Because he's going to do his development anyway, we're not at the 10%. And he said, I'll hold off if you want to meet with the folks for the purpose of expanding the 40R, because that will give us an opportunity to get the bonus money from the state and then the 40S money on a yearly basis. Now, that money is subject to appropriation, and in the last 2 years, Lakeville only got half of what it should, but it's still, you know, over the span of that program, we've received $900,000 from initial money from 40R, and then probably another $1 million since its inception. So even though you can't always count on the money, there has been a definite influx of cash from it. So that's an example of what I'm doing in Lakeville, but in terms of being a town administrator, I would just carry that all through for the sake of letting folks decide at town meeting. I mean, it's really about giving the townspeople the option.
Do you have elderly housing in Lakeville?
We don't.
So that's another reason why you have 40B. We're not, we haven't met our quota either, but we do have Lincoln Village in the north end, and it's, you know, income, rent based on income.
Yep.
And they're two-story buildings, and, you know, there's a waiting list.
Sure. Yeah, there actually is some over 55 rental property in Lakeville.
Okay, this is
That's not run, right. Correct.
It's income controlled, and also if you're disabled, or, so there's other criteria.
I see, okay, so it's,
Okay,
yeah.
so we call it elderly housing, Lincoln Village, but there are people there that aren't elderly, but they have other conditions that would allow them to live there.
Okay, sure. And is that run by, do you have a
Dayton Housing Authority.
housing authority
Elected.
that oversees
Yep.
that? I see, okay.
I did, if it's okay, if I can piggyback off of your previous question, Selectman Goulart. In the context of the Economic Development Commission, one thing I think the board, correct me if I'm wrong, if you guys don't agree, they are working actively on bringing some businesses into town, but because I work full-time and, you know, Nancy's very active in the community and Chairman Taylor is as well, the communication has been, they'll ask us for things and then it turns out they really needed something else. So there's some sort of a disconnect. Do you see yourself as playing kind of a role as maybe like a conduit between the various commissions and committees and perhaps what they may need from us and us directly? Because, you know, we're not here, and I doubt that my colleagues want to be here all day, every day.
Sure.
So.
No, absolutely, that's a whole aspect of it that is really a necessary function of the job. So a town administrator really needs to be a coordinator between all of the boards, okay? So it's really important to have the town administrator not necessarily attending every meeting of every board, but certainly in the beginning to get a flavor of what the culture is of those separate boards. But on a day-to-day basis, the town administrator has to be a resource for those boards to get answers to questions, to do research for them on specific issues, as long as it's all under the direction and guidance of the Board of Selectmen. I mean, I think you want to make sure that you're all aware of what they're up to, so to speak, and not to say that there's anything nefarious going on, but to say that you want to make sure that the resource of the town administrator is being best utilized.
Correct. And I didn't mean to speak for you both. So.
You can- So, being the first town administrator, you could be, you know, people have always come to the Board of Selectmen, so that's gonna change. Some people, that'll be real easy, others may not be so easy. So how will you deal with that?
With what specifically?
Well, you know, people have been reporting to the board directly, all department heads.
Oh, I see, okay.
So some are gonna have no problem with reporting to the town administrator, others will be somewhat reluctant perhaps, I don't know for sure, but that happens in any organization.
Change
Right.
in general is
No, of course, absolutely. Well, I think my initial thought on that is that again, it's kind of the go-to answer, but it's true in the sense that you can't have somebody get dropped into an organization and expect to do anything other than kind of be there as a resource. So obviously you'd want to meet with the department heads and get a flavor for how they are and build a relationship with everybody. It's, at the end of the day, that's the important aspect of this job, is to get an understanding of how everybody does what they do. And not to oversee that, but to be a resource for them to do it better if there's room for improvement. I mean, that's really the approach, I think, that I take with everything. So, whether they report to me or you is largely up to the three of you to determine what the role is of the town administrator.
No,
So,
yeah.
you know, that, it may be that, and again, I don't know this off the top, or I should say I don't know this through what I read about Dayton, but, you know, if you have a strong chief in terms of the police and fire, there's really no oversight
Well,
on
the
that.
chief, the police is not a strong chief, but the fire is.
I see, okay, so do you serve as commissioners?
Yeah, yes, technically, yes.
Okay.
Right.
So ideally, you would still fill that role, and I would just be a resource for the chief so that he can administer his department the best he can. It's not to say that I shirk away from the responsibility of making decisions. I don't. I would want to make sure that all of you are comfortable with where that line is. Because I think that's an important aspect of this, where there hasn't been somebody in this role, and the expectations may be different depending on the circumstances. But to a certain extent, I think that is an advantage of me over a candidate that may have already been a town administrator, honestly.
You don't have like so much.
I'm not gonna come
what it's
in
gonna
and
be like.
have an expectation of anything. I'm gonna come in and build relationships and learn what role I need to play with department heads, so as not to step on toes.
The town administrator that you have, has that person been there very long?
Yes, she has been there 17 years.
As the town administrator, or did she come
Correct.
in as something else and then work her way up?
She was originally elected as a treasurer, and she came over to work as the interim. What happened was they hired an initial town administrator who passed away like within 6 months of hiring.
That's a tough job.
That is a
Yeah, I think it was obviously unforeseen. I hope the job didn't.
no.
Saying you want to be a town administrator, really?
Yeah.
It probably wouldn't apply to that.
Very foreboding. And then they had another person come in that it didn't work out, and they left with kind of a vacancy, so she came in and filled that role, and then was hired to become the full-time the full town administrator, and has been there ever since.
So I just have one question, because I just read this, I apologize, Mr. Chairman. I know, based on your background, you clearly have experience in actually crafting and implementing policy. This is just a general question. If the board, for example, sought your advice in actually creating, now I see the town administrator position as more of an implementing a type of role. Would you have any qualms about possibly helping if we had questions? I know you said you would be a resource, which I really appreciate. Would you have any qualms about possibly assisting the board in actually crafting policies? For example, we have a policies and procedures manual we'll need to eventually revise and kind of make Dayton specific. Is that something you could see yourself helping out
Absolutely,
with?
no, I think that would be something that I would want to do, is go through the policies and procedures through every facet of what the Board of Selectmen oversees, HR, policies and procedures. We just did one in Lakeville relative to a social media policy, for example, for employees, and I enjoy that. I mean, it's kind of my personality to order things. So I definitely would, with direction from the board, unilaterally draft and present that information for you to consider and revise as needed and implement as policy.
Now, we don't have a bylaw, and we don't have a legislation to establish this position. Do you have any concern about that?
Yes and no. I think, you know, doing a little research on this position, it kind of fell short the last time out.
Yeah.
And I think that for the sake of the voters, you got it right this time, so to speak, in terms of the ordering of what their expectation was for the ordering of how this should happen. I don't have the concern to a point where I wouldn't want to take advantage of the opportunity and go on the adventure, so to speak. I mean, that's one aspect of it. You know, again, not to make light of it too much, but I think it's also an opportunity, though, really for you all to decide exactly what would be best suited for the circumstances and enact or create a job description, for lack of a better term, that really suits the needs of the town. I think it's a great opportunity for all of you.
And the town administrator as well, because we've
Absolutely.
done it with that.
Absolutely.
Because that's one of our, we haven't had a town administrator. We all have ideas about it. I think we're pretty much on the same page about it, but we need to.
The one thing a town administrator can't be is everything to everybody.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Now, but that's part of what you have to kind of try to be, so I understand that to a certain degree. And I can honestly say that if I have the opportunity to play that role, you'll get the best that I can give you with everything. I mean, that's how I am, and so I look at it as, like I said, part of the adventure.
What do you think is your strength that you would bring to a position like this?
I tend to approach things very level-headed and very objectively. I know that with a position like this, you tend to deal with different opinions, and sometimes they're very emotionally charged, the issues, and I have a good ability of leafing through the emotion to get to the root of somebody's issue. And I always say this when I'm faced with this, if I'm in a meeting or even if I'm dealing with a client, I always say to myself, don't listen to how the message is being presented, listen to the message, and is the message legitimate? Is it reasonable? And if it is, then I give it weight. So I think that's a great strength in this position, where you're dealing a lot of times with a lot of different emotion, and there's a lot of...
Sure, yeah.
And I just
that
wanted
type
to
of
add,
play.
not just that, a lot of the employees who work in Dayton have lived in the town all their lives, they raised their kids here, so you will certainly, and this is not talking about anyone in particular, but you'll get a lot of, oh, we've always done it this way, so, you know, you'll, there'll be, your approach, I think, sounds best to just observe, listen to people when you first get here. I think that approach is you'll do well with that approach.
But I will say, we have a wonderful staff of employees in this town, very dedicated group of people. And
Sure.
they work hard, so. The strength thing, I want to hit the opposite. What do you think is your greatest weakness that you have to work on to make you successful?
I think that or I should say the opposite side of that coin, there are times where I will get lost in a situation and need to take 5 minutes to recalibrate. As good as I am at being measured and reserved, sometimes I find myself in certain circumstances, and it's not any particular set of circumstances that trigger it, but where I just need to take five.
Back off a little bit.
Yeah, I see that as a weakness, but ultimately, I think it's something that I can.
If you handle it right, it's a strength, the acknowledgement of it.
Yeah, perhaps.
The other question I have is, what would you say is the most difficult situation you've had to deal with in your career, and how'd you handle it? And what'd you learn from it?
Let me think about that.
Not in your law practice.
Sure.
Focusing on selectmen,
Yeah,
public service.
That's constantly putting out fires, and that's kind of just a different approach or a different, all of that blurs into one big.
Whole different set of rules.
Sure. In terms of municipal, the municipal sphere, it really is, the relationship with the school committee, I think generally is the hardest thing that I personally am dealing with as a selectman. I was on the school committee. I was a champion of full regionalization. It was going to bring about, and it did bring about certain improvements to the school and how their budget works. But it really fell short in a lot of different ways, and my father was an educator, he was a principal, he was a superintendent, and I really thought I could have more of an impact on the education, or the educational aspects of the community, and now being on the Board of Selectmen, I've really tried to divorce myself from that issue to a certain degree, because there's really kind of a culture clash between school committee and municipal. And it's really, despite my best efforts, it's been nearly impossible to try to integrate that or improve it. That's really been my biggest disappointment. You know, I always thought that if you keep at something, and I'm sad to report that to a certain degree I've given up on it.
I think there's a natural us and them atmosphere when you talk about towns and schools, but I will say this. After I retired, I got on the finance committee, and then I was a selectman for 3 years, back on the finance committee, back on the Board of Selectmen. And I will say right now, as we currently exist, we, in my opinion, have one of the best relationships we've had with the regional school district in years. And I think it has a lot to do with the fact that, first of all, this board meets quarterly, more or less, with the superintendent of schools. And we just have a general discussion, or we have topics we want to ask about, or he's telling us about something that they're looking at. We've also had some extremely difficult times. This town sued the regional school district, and we won and got our money. There was a real bad situation where we were being overassessed for a number of years, and we paid millions. If that made the paper, that's no... But what I will say is that I believe the town of Dayton and the Dayton-Rehoboth Regional School District has a better working relationship now. Now, I don't think somebody from Rehoboth would make that statement.
You think?
Because obviously that million that we were paying that we shouldn't have, the shoe's on the other foot. So
Sure.
This town financially and tax-wise, we're about, as of tonight's discussion downstairs, we're something like $720,000 under the levy limit, okay?
Oh, wow.
Going into, but that's all it, but I understand exactly what you're saying, because when I was first on the finance committee, again, it was the us's and the them's, and I used to say, but those us's, they've got our children. You
Right.
can't, but anyhow, I think things are better now. One thing I wanted to comment on, in your letter, you talked about training you've taken, training meetings and things you've attended, Mass Municipal, Bridgewater, DLS, so forth and so on. So, number one, I'm glad to see you keep up with this stuff. There used to be a lady from Lakeville that served on the same committee that I do at MMA, Nancy, the Eagle
Yates.
lady. Yes.
She's our conservation agent.
Huh?
She's our conservation agent.
Is she?
Lakeville. Yes.
All right. She served on the same, I'm still on that committee, but she and I served together. And Brett and I have attended several training sessions with the Selectmen's Association. And a number of people from this town attend the annual meeting and trade show because they found it so beneficial. So at DLS, the chairman of the Board of Assessors and I just attended a training session. So it's good to see that you're out there and you're interested in keeping up, because we're not always available. We try to cover as much as we can and still be in town, which is kind of tough. But we found it very beneficial. I know you're a green community. I know you're community compact. We're not green community yet. That's one of the things Brett's working on. We just got community compact.
Saw that. Yes,
So,
congratulations.
Thank you.
And we got grant money to help us work on that, and obviously, we're looking for more grant money, because now we have the designation. So it's good to see that you've had involvement, or at least you know what we're talking about
Yes.
when we say
I
those
actually
things.
met you and Brett at a DLS
Oh my God, that
event.
you look so familiar.
And I'm-
That's
I'm
what I
embarrassed
was thinking.
Plymouth.
No, it was in, I think it was in Holy Cross.
Oh,
Yes,
the training
when we went
session.
there and we did the
All right.
workshop.
The Saturday
Yep.
session,
I
okay,
remember.
that's
You
right.
look so familiar.
I
I'm
thought
sorry
you
I
did
wasn't that
too.
memorable.
I remember.
I thought you looked familiar, but
Yes.
thought so too.
I couldn't,
I didn't want to freak
I
you
know
out and
I've
ask.
We have about 5 minutes
I've
to go.
never seen him
so
in court, so that's,
That's a good thing.
I did just want to
So we have
ask
about
you.
5 minutes left, so
I wanted to ask you one thing. Well, actually, two things. One thing's really quick. Green communities. That is something we're thinking about. There's a lot to it, as you know. So we just got a technical assistance grant through Serpent to help us become a green community. So if you were hired, we would love, I'm on the Green Communities Grant Committee, we would love for you to help with that. My real question is kind of in relationship to that. If the Board of Selectmen created a policy and you didn't agree with it per se, would you still be willing to implement it?
Absolutely, that's not my role to determine what's right for your town. It's
would you
my-
speak up during the
Yeah, would you
initial
let us know at least?
process? In other words, if we were formulating a policy or something, would you speak up and say, I think you're headed kind of in the wrong
I
direction?
would, but I would frame it much like I would frame legal advice to a client. I would say, here are the pros and cons to your circumstances. Here's why it may be good, here's why it may be bad. It's really up to you to determine what's in the best interest of your community.
Good answer. I'm just kidding.
One thing I remember about the Holy Cross training day up there was, when I came back, I said, we got I don't know if he's a computer geek or a computer nerd, but he was the highlight of that training when we did that workshop.
I have one more question, at least one more. As a lawyer with your own law firm, why would you want to leave that and come to be a town administrator?
Being an attorney is gratifying to a certain degree, but again, I think this is an opportunity to really jump into something that I'm more passionate about. It's not that I'm not passionate about the law, but to a certain degree, I became an attorney with an eye on becoming a town administrator at some point. The circumstances haven't really presented themselves in terms of my experience and my level of municipal experience to be at a place where I think I'm ready. But I think that this, and I said this to the committee that did the initial screening, it isn't a question of if, it's a question of when. I mean, this is something that I really want to do. So if it doesn't work out here now, I will continue doing what I'm doing in anticipation of the next opportunity.
So just in a very few sentences, tell us why we should hire you.
I think you should hire me because I'm passionate about what I do in terms of municipal governance. I will bring with me an open approach to problem solving that will be beneficial to your board. I will do my best, sincerely do my best with every task I'm given And I think, honestly, I think you would be a fun board to work with in that.
Think so, huh?
No, really, I mean, I think that.
We haven't.
You gotta watch this guy here.
You all seem to have a good energy, and I've watched your meetings, and I think you work well together, and that's a big reason why I thought that this would be an appropriate job to explore.
We're the only town that had cake for the lieutenant governor.
We take care of our own.
Well, it's CCC, she told us that.
So,
We made her cut the cake.
any other questions?
You took my last question.
Any other questions?
No?
Anything else you wanna tell us?
No, I did prepare what I would call the initial first 90 days.
Okay,
plan that I'd like to
that was one of the
leave.
questions I would ask you.
Plans.
It's kind of something that I thought would be useful, and really, I think it kind of emphasizes my approach to kind of take the time to absorb the culture and get a flavor for everything, but it's a little more detailed than that. It's,
Yep.
Thank you so much.
Does John Ryder still practice law in Lakeville?
He does, yeah, he's still right on 105.
Yeah. Okay. I haven't seen him in years, but he did some real estate stuff for us many years ago.
Yeah, he's still active. He was in front of us not that long ago. He was helping a developer with a road acceptance.
Okay,
Great, thank you very much.
thank you very much.
One last question that has nothing to do with anything tonight. Are they ever gonna do anything with the Lakeville Hospital?
It just sold.
You're kidding?
A private developer bought it
Wow.
for $1.
Wow.
Good about it.
So is it gonna be a hospital?
No, they're gonna
No,
take it down.
no, I don't know what he's gonna do. I don't
Because they
know.
said the buildings have asbestos and all those problems, and they've been empty. I'm glad to hear that. That is beautiful
The
land.
company that owned it was it was the holding company for Stop and Shop, and they estimated the cleanup to be between $6 and $7 million, which is what they were asking for it, $6 million. So he jokingly said at a meeting, well, you should sell it to me for $1 then. And they said, would you be willing to buy it? We would sell it to you for $1.
I'm like, $2. I got two.
Yeah, so it did, it sold, and again, what happens remains to be seen, but something will be happening shortly.
I'm glad to hear that. It's beautiful land.
I know,
All those
finally.
years it sat there.
Yep, it was such a waste.
Okay,
Yeah.
well, thank you very
so
much.
Mr.
Nice-
Burke.
Thanks for coming in, nice
Appreciate
meeting
it
you.
very much. We'll be
Great
in
to see you
touch.
again, and,
Yeah.
You as well.
Thank you.
all right.
Hey, that was
Familiar too, I'm like, I don't know too many attorneys, so I'm not. Hi Brett, pleasure to meet you.
I met you before now. Nice to see you again.
Hi, I'm Nancy Goulart. Nice to meet you.
Thank you for coming.
Yes.
Should I be speaking right into this?
You
You don't have to write into it, but
I'm very loud, so I tend to.
So am I, I'm
whatever you're
Italian.
comfortable with. And the water's there if you
Great, thank you.
care.
You gave her a different water bottle, right?
Yeah, I did.
Just make it.
I got
I know
three
the
of them over
budget's
here.
tight this year.
Okay, well, welcome. It's nice to see you again. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you've been doing?
Sure. So I'm originally from Rhode Island, not very far. I'm from Portsmouth, Rhode Island, actually. And I came up here to Stonehill, which brought me to Massachusetts. So I've lived here ever since. I think I stopped going back home to my mom in 2005. So I'm identifying with Massachusetts. I graduated Stonehill and just asked the Office of Advancement if we had any alumni in the State House. I knew that I had wanted to go to the State House. I did a stint, if you will, at the Capitol in Washington, which was fantastic. And I wanted to continue that. So we did have an alumni, and he was hiring. So I got the job there and had the distinct pleasure of working with State Representative at the time for me, Tom Kennedy, who has since passed, but gave me quite the education in Massachusetts politics. So from there, I moved on to West Bridgewater, where I've been I'm coming up on my 9-year anniversary. And
Congratulations.
thank you. And it's, the parallels between West Bridgewater and Dayton are a little uncanny. I grew that position from confidential secretary, which I was hired at, into assistant town administrator. And I think that I could provide the same here in Dayton, which I have to say, I've watched some of your videos and your enthusiasm is contagious. And, you know, I was like smiling like a fool. I was like, oh, you look so great.
Well, somebody likes everything, so we never know.
So that's just a little bit of me. Personally, I have 2 kids, married for 7 years, and 2 boys.
Fantastic.
So what do you know about Dayton?
What do I know about Dayton? Well, it was named after a woman, I know that. So I've looked at, I know you're an economic target area, that you're interested in building up business. In West Bridgewater, they built up business, and I personally think it's a little bit excessive in the sense of traffic and people and growth. So if I were to be here in Dayton, I would definitely monitor that kind of growth to make sure it didn't totally explode and take away the character. I know that your residents here, and I'm assuming you as well, do really care about the agrarian heritage here. You signed your community compact, one of which was the agricultural bylaw, the right to farm community. West Bridgewater did that a handful of years ago, which is a great fit, I think, to both communities. And you're doing complete streets. So I was attracted to Dayton because of your forward thinking. I have to commend you all. I think you're doing a lot with a little, and I think you're amazing for being able to do this without professional staff in the town administrator role. Complete streets is definitely no easy feat, lots of steps to take, so I'm very impressed with you.
Have they done that up in Bridgewater?
No, we're just starting. So we've merged our highway and forestry to a DPW type, and his main, he's the person that's taking over as the DPW director. He's going to be kind of hitting the ground running. We have a sidewalk issue in West Bridgewater, so I noticed that you guys are working on sidewalks here. I think everybody has a sidewalk issue. But it's hard to balance the ruralness and the agrarian with, the pedestrian activity that you would normally see in a city. But I think it's welcome. I think residents like it, and it helps.
Oh, they love the sidewalk. We get, it's like the only thing we hear, no, I'm just kidding.
And that, when you say you merged the highway department with the forestry department, in this community,
He's the
highway
same guy.
superintendent has so many titles, he'd need 2 doors to get into his office if we put them all down. And he's the tree warden
I
and the
saw
this
that.
and the that. But Tom Ferry is also a graduate of the Aggie School, so he's got agricultural roots.
And he grew
The
up.
highway department in this town literally does everything that no other department does. They put up the lights at Christmas, they help set up the voting booths, they mow the lawns, they obviously do all the roads, but the Complete Streets program and all the work, we really, really can thank Tom Ferry for that. He's done an excellent job. The sidewalk completion over here that we did, we talked about that when the Berkeley-Dighton Bridge was replaced, but we knew that was, the town was going to have to pick up the tab for that. And once the bridge was done and he had Chapter 90 money, he brought that forward and said, it's time to do this. So we're just wrapping up the, if you will, the final landscaping in front of the main Aggie School building. But we've already got another project on the stove, and if we get the money at town meeting in a couple of weeks, next spring, we'll do all the background now, but next spring, he'll probably be doing construction. But,
Well, that's amazing, and it's nice to see that you have somebody like born and raised on your team here. So that's
the reason I think Dayton is successful as far as getting things done and not, we don't pay a lot of people to do things.
right.
Obviously, we have regular employees but we have a lot of people on committees that volunteer to do things, and either they get paid very little or they don't get paid anything. But when you want something done, if you ask people to step up, you will get volunteers.
That's great.
And we're fortunate that people in town feel that way.
That's great. Truly it is.
Yeah.
Makes a difference.
Well, it's a great community. People love this community. We have a lot of building going on. But
Yeah.
So as a first town administrator, I got 2 questions here. What do you see the relationship between town administrator and the Board of Selectmen?
So to me, that's really up to you and how you want to adapt this role. Being a first timer, I am less set in my ways. I'm very willing to take direction Board of Selectmen, but also step up if that's the will of the board. I'm a good leader, I'm a good team player, I like to offer support to other departments. People probably say this all the time, but I'm not a micromanager unless I really need to be. I like to see people, set expectations, these are the goals, these are where together we've decided what the goals are, and then make that happen, and make them reasonable goals and obtainable goals, which what drew me to your community compact was those were doable things that you put on there. In West Bridgewater, by contrast, I don't think they're very doable, to be honest, without a lot of assistance. And we're not as, you guys have great state legislators, Mark Pacheco and Rep. Pat Ed. We do not. We have Senator Timilty, but he's just getting his feet wet in the Senate, and then Representative Dubois. So you have a leg up there. But I do like the attainable goals. I think that's important to be successful and give people kind of this positive momentum that once you get one. I watched this video once, and he said, make your bed every day, because once you do one task, you do another task.
Good video.
So, yes.
Very
One
good.
of the things that we've done, at one time, up until about April of this year, the Board of Selectmen was the Board of Health.
I saw that. Busy.
yeah.
Talk about double duty.
separated out,
My
right.
goodness.
Now that we have a separate appointed Board of Health, 3-member board, so we're not really dealing with that. On the compact, the goal was to come up with 3 best practices. So each one of us decided on a practice, and then we talked about it as a board. And so, in effect, each one of us has a responsibility for what Jack is doing open space, Brett is the Agricultural Commission, and I'm doing stormwater, which is Board of Health, but once I get this done, they get the whole thing back. Our NIPD permit is coming up for renewal, so.
And she's a queen.
You got the real tough one.
Yep.
But she's the queen of stormwater, so you gotta understand that.
But we,
She knows a lot.
Good.
I worked on it the last time I was on the board.
Oh.
And so, with the splitting of the boards, I just didn't want to just dump it on the new board. I mean, that's not fair. But anyhow, the community compact thing is like that. And this Board of Selectmen, Board of Health, and the ones before us, the only way we could manage things was to take on projects. Oh, okay, we got to do this. Who wants to take this one on?
Right,
Okay.
right.
Which means you take it on, but you work on it, you go back to the board, and say, here's where we are, and then you go back and do some more things.
Right.
And put into that some of the stuff that your colleagues have told you about, or that you found out about. And that's the reason we've been able to manage. Has been extremely difficult,
Oh,
and you
I'm
probably
sure.
know this is our 3rd attempt to get a town administrator.
Yeah.
So
3rd time's
hopefully,
a charm, right?
It better be.
it better be, on 3 strikes, you're out.
So going back to my previous question a little bit, we don't have a bylaw
Right.
to establish, we don't have a legislation to establish it. Does that concern you at all?
I don't think so. West Bridgewater started the same way, and only recently, 4 years ago, actually received a town administrator. Before David Gagney, who's my town administrator now, her name is Beth Pharisee, 21 years of service with the town. She was administrator, that's it.
Okay.
So even, it was recent to turn over to town administrator, we passed a bylaw.
Yeah.
And I really believe that if you, and you have a very involved populace, so it's probably almost easier, but I really believe if you lay out education and a reasonable, logical explanation to residents, more often than not, they're gonna, if it makes sense,
Yeah.
they're gonna go forward with it. So I'm not concerned, your population, your town meeting has approved this 3 separate times.
And we
Now
we all support it.
Well,
We
of
all
course,
support
and
it.
then they told me a unanimous vote from the finance committee, which is pretty impressive.
And rare, no.
Yes, and very rare.
The chairman of the finance committee pretty much led the charge every time.
did.
He did.
Yeah,
And
so-
even when it got reversed and back in. Do you have, in West Bridgewater, you're not part of a regional school district, are you?
No, we do not. We do have some students at the Bristol Aggie. We
Right.
have our own school system.
And you
So regional
must
would
be part of
different.
a vocational system
Yes,
somewhere.
Southeastern,
You're in
regional.
Southeastern, okay. The good news is, other than passing the budget at town meeting, town administrator will not be dealing with schools, because we're a full K to 12. We
And
belong
it's
to
good
Aggie. We belong to Aggie, and we belong to
Right.
Bristol Plymouth. So, those are the largest part of our budget, and it usually passes without one question. Not one question. It's
Always
unbelievable.
the case.
I just have a general question. So we live in a town where, I feel like a lot of people, and myself included, we have fantastic employees, but, we've never had a town administrator before, we've never had a separate board of health, so there are a lot of changes that are, and they're good changes, but they're changes, and changes can be tough. If you're selected and you first begin, how would you approach, that delicate balance?
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. So great question. I probably would not make a major change for like 6 months minimum. I would really welcome sitting down with the three of you, really establishing the clear expectations, the roles that you desire. I'm, willing for everything. I'm excited for this opportunity. I'm totally grateful for this finalist position. I think I'm a great match, and, that will probably come up later. But I probably would observe. I would like to, one of my questions for you actually is if I were selected, how I'd be introduced to your employees. I would like to sit down with the
We don't
department.
answer any questions.
The new sheriff, that's how you'd be introduced.
Here she is. No. So I would like to meet everybody, sit down with them one-on-one, talk about challenges that they experience in their offices, but also how they do things. Things are different. So a very funny, again, the parallels are uncanny. I looked at your website when I saw this posting, and West Bridgewater's, it's basically exact. And I was like, oh, this will be easy for me to find everything because I know this map. So I actually led the design in West Bridgewater. So I'm not afraid to roll up my sleeves, which I feel like a lot of you, the three of you do, but also your residents do. I'm not afraid to roll up my sleeves to get the job done. And it's got my name on it, so I want it to be the best that it can be.
I think we spoke once. So, give me a second. We spoke once because we used Revise, and so I did call West Bridgewater, and it was you.
It was me. Oh my gosh. Wow, this is a small world. So, yeah, I love Revise, so I can't say enough good
too.
things. This website is super powerful and really helps provide the outreach to the residents that I think you are trying to grow. So it's a really great tool. I would use that. I just want to kind of get in and meet people, I guess, when I first start. I would probably work on a job description, again, get that approved, and then prepare for town meeting to institute a bylaw if that's what you wish. But in West Bridgewater, we didn't have a bylaw for many years, and everything kind of went.
So one of the issues, kind of a little bit of what Red asked, but, everybody's been reporting to us.
Yes.
And so, naturally, not everybody's going to be 100% pleased to have a report to somebody else.
Oh, of course.
So how will you deal with that? Because, there's going to be different levels of that,
Right.
as you must know.
When we moved from administrator to town administrator, we just kind of took care of that. And then again, when I became assistant town administrator officially, in April of 2016, I'm more of a manager now, so we've been rolling that out. That's gone really successfully.
Okay.
But, because I've had a great relationship with all of the employees in West Bridgewater. I'm a people person. I like to be friendly and get to know people on a bit of a personal level, but, work with them and be part of the team. When David came in, he was outside of the municipal government field. So of course everyone's like, no, you can't do it. But he's great, and he came from a car sales background, which more often than not actually applies. Shocks me every day, but it's amazing how much I'm like, oh, well, this makes sense.
Was he a used car salesman?
Well, no, new. He was general manager in Saturn in Norwood. But it's very funny how it translates. I lost my train of thought now. Hold on. We'll back up. We'll back up. So he had his own, I sort of had the opportunity to be an observer of how things went with him and how things didn't. And I would learn from him and how he worked on it. And one of the things he did was he met with the department heads. I thought that was a great idea. So I would mimic that. I would also, again, involve the Board of Selectmen. We would deliver a clear message. If the desire is that the department heads go through the town administrator, that would need to be communicated at a department head meeting. Hopefully you're there. That would be great. But to deliver the message and set the tone, and, I would just have to prove to everybody I'm not going to come in and shake everything up. And that's not my style. And if it's working, why it's not broken, don't fix it.
That's a good style.
And again, I wouldn't come in and make crazy changes, for day one.
I'm reading through some of the things that you would like to do, and you talk about guiding elected officials through the many open meeting law, public records law, dealing with residents, procurement. Obviously, because we don't have a town administrator, many of the things that you listed here that are probably part of your job right now, if you were to list them, we would have all different names next to them. There would be, because everybody is doing something.
up the
We
job.
have a certified procurement officer, because the town is supposed to have one, so she's liaison to the Board of Selectmen, but she's the one that got the certification. We have a public records law person who happens to be the town clerk, because who else was gonna do it? So when you, if you're hired and you come in, you're gonna say, have a list of tasks. Can you tell me who does these? Because that's who you're gonna go talk
We'll
to.
give you that list, don't
That's,
worry.
Like a little, like a Facebook,
Yeah,
a
so
real
you
one. Who's
understand.
this? Yeah.
and then besides all of those duties that have to be done, obviously, we have an elected treasurer collector and a town clerk, and all the other kinds of positions that assessors that come with elected, you know, and we have obviously appointed, but, so as I'm reading through this, I'm thinking to myself, oh, Mary and Sue, and, you know, and I'm thinking all of that, so that's interesting.
In terms of communication, we are fortunate in Dayton to have a lot of people really passionate and willing to volunteer their time at no charge. But, you know, with a lot of boards and committees, you can get miscommunication or just lack of communication. Do you see your role as town administrator, if you were selected, as kind of being a conduit between the Board of Selectmen, because I can't go to all the meetings, I have work, you know, Jack is busy, Nancy is very, very busy, you know, with just volunteering and things like that. Would you see yourself playing a role as sort of the liaison or conduit between us and the other committees and boards?
Absolutely. That's part of my role now in West Bridgewater. It works really well. Again, everybody, we keep the channels of communication open, because if you don't communicate, that's when you have the problems. And so we like to keep those open. Everyone is very much aware that they are welcome to stop by. They don't even need to make an appointment. Stop by, come by, call, you know, we'll take care of the matter. So I definitely see the town administrator as this hub of communication and kind of managing it, and then keeping the three of you informed, and, you know, over
if we
time
need
I
to
would.
do anything.
Exactly, and over time, I'll be able to anticipate, you know, should I be selected, anticipate your specific interests, how you operate, how you like to be communicated with or not, what's a good time, so I'll be able to use that information to be most efficient that we can. So I think, the very involved residents, or group of residents, I like to see, you know, as a political nerd, I think that's great. But keeping that alive, there's no sense in having a town administrator that doesn't want to talk to anybody, and then all of your volunteers are like, well, I'm not doing this anymore. There's no sense in that. So I would like to maintain that, of course. And one committee specifically I'm interested in is the Economic Development Committee, which I noticed, I think the Planning Board, I don't know if she's the chairman, but she's also part of that. Heidi is her name, I think.
Oh, yeah.
So I'd like to just see where they're at, what's going on. I didn't see too many minutes posted on the website for them. So that's definitely,
Just something we've been trying since
Right,
the website
yes.
rolled out.
So my husband and I took our two kids down here on Columbus Day, and we drove around, and I got lost a little bit, which is fine, and I think I missed like half the town. But we came by, and I was like, oh, we could do this, and I'm like, wow, I'm getting overwhelmed, and I had my cell phone with the Notes app, and I'm like, I'm missing half the town because I'm texting, or I'm typing all of this. So I was kind of having my gears turned, and in my essay, I did mention capturing revenue sources that might not be popular with other communities, but if it's zoned correctly, you know, we keep it away from the residents, and, you know, monitor it and establish rules and regulations and make sure that it can't be a problem. So there are various sources of revenue that don't fall on the tax base, which is very important. And we try to do that in West Bridgewater, and it's a good model, but your finances are great.
Taxes are a little high, but.
We have a former finance committee member on the board, and he just spent a life in the financial sector.
Yes.
So we're pretty good on that end.
Yeah.
So,
We have been very fortunate as far as I said, I was at a finance committee meeting earlier, a few minutes, and we're $720,000 under the levy limit.
That's great.
Under the levy
Wow.
limit. okay?
And we lowered the tax rate last year.
I would describe this town as being progressive, but conservative.
Absolutely.
We try to get as much value from what we spend, but in this town also, we don't spend a lot on certain things because people do things for nothing. That's
Right,
literally true.
right, right.
Okay?
I completely want to
We don't create
drag
jobs
onto
and
that.
fund them. We don't first say, we got a job, what are we gonna pay? We say, we got a job, who wants to do this?
Yes.
And, you know, if it's a project or a task, somebody will take it on and get it done and whatever.
We do that
Just
now.
just as an aside, this weekend, if you wanna come back to Dayton, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, especially Saturday, the open house at the Aggie School. Your kids will love that because the barns will be
Saw the
open.
paper article
Yes,
about that.
and they'll be able to see the animals, they'll be able to go through the museum, everything is
Great.
gonna be open. So if you're looking for something to do this weekend,
Always
come
looking
on
for my
down.
kids to get out of the house, for sure. They like to go out and do stuff. You know, it's really great to hear you say that. I know this isn't an interview, but I truly believe that, you know, we want to do this, how can we make it happen now without hiring staff? Because with staff, it's not just your paycheck, it's your
Oh,
benefits, it's all the
exactly.
other, you know, stuff,
Retirement.
contingencies, and potentially maybe they're a problem employee, and then you have all this other stuff going on. So I agree, it's how I got the dog park. We wanted a dog park. I love dogs, so, you know, I was like, sure, I jumped right on it, and there we are. I'm working on a dog park all of a sudden. So we have the same sort of mantra. It's what I would bring here. It's my style. I like to give bang for the buck, if you will, and I like to work in a town how I want my town officials to work. I don't want them wasting money. I don't want them thinking they need to hire out. Of course, hire out if you need to, you know, understanding your skill set and what you're good at. I mean, I'm not gonna go build a building. I don't know anything about that, but
We got a committee that's working on
good.
that.
We don't want to talk
There's
about,
a
we don't want
committee
to
for
talk
that.
about
It's,
it.
instead of an app, there's a committee for that here. There's a committee
I
for
think our
that.
last few hires, we hired, the last two in the fire department were EMT, so we have a good complement there, because we run our own ambulance,
Right.
2 ambulances. We have 3 vacancies in the police department, because somebody retired, and so that's gotta be, somebody moved up to sergeant, so we've got 3 positions open, that we're looking to fill. We hired reserves, but we're looking to fill the 3 full-time. Those were funded at the last town meeting. But other than, and we did, about a year ago, we hired 2 people in the highway department, and as I told you, they do everything nobody else
Yes.
does. For those positions, besides the CDLs and all the certifications and licenses you need, they had to have carpentry skills because they're renovating the old town hall next door. And this will be a campus. There will be offices over in that building, all on this same campus. And so that will free up space in this building for the town administrator and a few other places that we've got really cramped quarters next door. But anyhow, these are all things that are going on in town here, but we're all on a campus, with the exception of public safety, the library. Out back.
highway is-
Highways down the highway, and then over here we have the prime time, which is the senior daycare. But then up at Lincoln Village, the elderly housing, there's another office, and that's the Council on Aging. So,
I missed that. I didn't, so prime time is in addition to,
it comes under the Council on Aging, and they have an office at Lincoln Village, which is elderly housing, but that's under the Dayton Housing Authority, the actual housing.
Right, okay.
But prime time is out back here.
Okay.
And
Yes, I
near the
saw that.
Lions Pavilion.
right.
That's another thing, this town is a very active Lions Club. And
They do a lot of great work.
they do so much for this town. They
Oh, there's
do.
an art festival, November 5th. You should actually, it's unbelievable.
That's at Arujo's
Shameless
Greenhouse.
plug.
Yeah, I want to ask you,
Oh, sorry. No, Mr. Chairman.
what would you say is, well, first of all, I want to tell you, I thought your essays were well-written and
Thank you.
thorough.
You know how to turn the
Nice.
word.
But what would you, other than that, don't tell me writing, what do you think is the greatest strength you bring to Dayton?
Positivity. I think the power of positivity is a strong thing. I have a how can we get it done attitude. Of course, you cannot always please everybody, and being able to, break the news, if you will, I think is a strength of mine. I have great relationship building skills. Again, I'm a people person. I like people. I like learning about residents that make up the community, and I genuinely want to work for them and what they envision in their community. I want them to be happy. I can't make them happy all the time with different decisions. Maybe one day you would have to raise the tax rate, but I want to generally make them happy, and I think that's being positive through what can be negative, I think is a powerful trait to get it done, pave the way, if you will.
So to kind of piggyback off that, I'm just curious to know, this will be brief, Mr. Chairman.
Good.
Do you, just because I don't know you, in your leadership style, for example, in West Bridgewater, but you can just give a general answer.
Okay.
Do you have kind of a one-size-fits-all leadership, or is it more you kind of tailor it to who you're talking, to who you're speaking with, kind of what their personality is?
Like knowing your audience?
Yeah.
I would say I'm an open book. You know what you get with me. But I would say when I know that if I'm dealing, especially with a resident who might be particularly difficult or on edge, I saw your policy about appropriate behavior, and I love that. I've been trying to get West Bridgewater to do it, and they won't. But I agree that I think that that's an important thing to have in town hall specifically. But I will choose my words. I listen, especially in a tough situation. I'll listen, do less talking. And then if it's, once it's time for me to speak, walk them through what my process is going to be and set their expectation for what it is. And I always let them know when I'll call you back, and this is what, I'll report back when I have something. And even if I don't end up getting something, I still call them. I haven't forgotten you. This is what I'm waiting for. So I walk them through. So that's how I approach a resident who might have a problem. For an employee, definitely, I figure out who I'm talking to, if they're a problem employee, which, maybe there are, maybe there aren't, but kind of understanding the background of the situation, I think helps. But I certainly know my audience and approach each situation as necessary. And I've taken some HR training courses. We were out in Lenox, which was a fabulous seminar, their first fall conference that they put off, the MMPA, and it was excellent, lots of connections there. So, when I don't know anything, certainly, this would be my first time, but I know who to call. And also, I am very friendly with our former treasurer collector, John Duggan, who's now the vice president at Bristol County Savings Bank. So he had rave reviews about your town accountant and town treasurer, by the way, or treasurer collector. So I can work, he's a great resource, and he's right down the street. So if I don't know it, I know somebody who does, so I can call for backup.
I want to take the flip side of the strength.
Sure.
What do you think is one of your weaknesses that you need to work on?
I'm perfect. No.
Long answer.
She was texting instead of watching everything in
Yes,
time.
I know. That I was like, George, you have to turn around and miss half the time. Let's see. I think maybe the positivity could be, I'm an internal optimist, so sometimes I'm blind to what really, face it, this is not going to happen. Kind of like a Goonie, never say die. The dog park's a perfect example of this. I was like, oh, everyone's going to love it. It's a park. It's an open space.
Yeah.
Wrong.
Yeah.
Totally wrong. So I tend to give myself these kind of positive expectations where I'm not ignoring, but blind to the fact that that's not the case. I definitely try to look at all sides of an argument when I'm rolling out, and David will say, I'm top-notch at implementation and the details of a policy. So when rolling this out, when it's conceptual, I'll sit there and poke holes in it. How can they tell me it's wrong? How can they tell me they don't like it? How can they tell me there's a pitfall? And try my best. And then sometimes there's you have to have the pitfall, and that's just how it goes. So can we live with that? So we weigh that, and that's something that I got from grad school, definitely, but to kind of hone
Nobody
that in.
likes everything.
No. Do you, just to piggyback off Chairman Taylor's question, I do the same thing, and it's tough, you know, when you're creating policies and things like that, to think of all the other scenarios. But when you do eventually hear or think of those setbacks or potential drawbacks, are you flexible in your thought process, or are you still like, nope, we're gonna start, we already started, we're gonna steer the course?
So, no, I'm definitely very flexible. I hate to keep bringing up the dog park, but it was such a massive undertaking that it's really given me a lot of experience in this. So where we want it has no residents. So I'm like, this is amazing. Nobody's
What
going
could
to
go
complain
wrong?
about dog. Exactly. It's behind a church. The pastor is very dog friendly. Everything's going to be great. We're going to be great. And the Youth Athletic Association field is here, and the dog park was going to be here. And they had a problem with the dog sharing this is town-owned property, sharing the sidewalk. What do you mean you have a problem with that? And then all of a sudden, well, sometimes the kids throw balls there in practice. I'm like, why wouldn't anybody tell me this? So I sat there, I said, fine, I'll be a good neighbor. I don't want this to fail because somebody's upset and spurs everybody against it. So we flipped it was costly and we had to take a lot of things out, but we flipped the entrance and now we're on another side. And so, you know, I'm totally willing to work with people. You catch more flies with honey, is that the same?
Yep.
So I'm totally willing to work it. I want it to be successful, so help me make it successful. And you tell me your concerns, tell me what your problems with it are, and I'll either explain them away if they're unfounded maybe, or we'll work on a solution that provides it. But I'm all about quality and happiness at the end. I want you to use it, it's your facility.
And when when those concerns were raised to you about the sidewalks and all that, did you ever think to drop the idea, or you were like, it should happen, let's think of how to make it happen?
So this is, in this particular instance, I'm a go-getter. When I have my sights on something, I want to see it to fruition. It's very hard for me, again, I'm a goonie, it's very hard for me to let it go if I have faith that this is a valuable project. I think the dog park's a valuable project, but in addition, we're getting a grant that covers 90% of the cost. That's unheard of. So how do I turn that away? How do I surrender and just give up, you know, in this case, $90,000 for a public facility that will be used by what I see as a really underutilized population? People who don't have kids, people who are elderly and they're maybe not, you know, they're still out and they love their dogs and they still want to meet somebody. How do I help that population get out and be, you know, find a useful place in the community to meet somebody, to enjoy where they live? So that's really, you know, and there's rules to this park, where, you know, limits, so it's not crazy to let it go out of control. But it does help a population that doesn't really get served, you know, in traditional parks and places like that. So, no, I am definitely, if I think there's value.
I was reading about your involvement with labor negotiations and that.
Yes.
Am I to understand that you had both union and non-union employees? Because you said this is a new union, the library.
Correct. So right now, our library is non-union right now.
Okay.
And they want to unionize because the new director, who started about a year ago, instituted Saturday hours. I don't think it's crazy to have a library open on Saturday. It seems to me pretty
Logical.
nobody's open on Saturday.
Except during the summer. Summer,
exactly.
they aren't.
Town of Easton's the same way. That's when the public's available to bring their kids or whomever to the library. So we're like, oh great, yeah, they're going to be open on Saturdays. The library director, same thing. In her field, everybody's open on a Saturday. And they did not like it. And I think they, as Brett was saying, the change, they didn't like that, and so they've decided to unionize. So when are you ever at the beginning stages of collective bargaining? So again, government nerd, that's pretty fun for me, but it is right now. It probably won't be tomorrow when I meet with them, but we're working with town council, who actually is your town council as well. So he is going to be with me tomorrow. We're going to be meeting with them. So they're non-union right now.
No wonder we can't get David when we want.
I know, we're hogging him. Definitely, we're hogging him.
He speaks highly of you.
Well, he's the best. I speak highly of him. I love him, and I hope he continues what he's doing forever.
So, all of our employees are unionized except those who are exempted by statute, obviously. Now, so when this union is formed, will all of West Bridgewater employees be in a union of somewhere, some union?
We have Council on Aging employees that are part-time, and they are non-union. We have, our department heads are all exempt, but all non-union, but they have their own contracts with the Board of Selectmen.
Individual
Individual
contracts, it's
contracts.
not, it's not Group B or Group A, whatever,
Correct,
okay?
correct. We don't have pay ranges either. A lot of contracts will have ranges, we don't have that, it's what it is. So then, let's see, I'm also working on, I have fire, highway, water, tree, so our public works and our water department, we have an enterprise water department, not a district, as here in Dayton, and they're all in one union as well. Clerical union, and this.
Our clerical includes library and council on aging, so it's,
Yeah.
you know, it's a catch-all. One of the other things you mentioned was managing an internship program. What kind of internship?
So we are partnered, we're taking advantage of our close proximity with Bridgewater State. They have a great MPA program. So we're taking it, Mary Waldron heads up this kind of department there, and we work with her closely to get interns. So this is our second year doing it, and we have a rock star right now. She's great, and they really help us. We do pay them. It's part-time, it ends up being about 12 hours a week. So we got this passed at town meeting. The first year, it was in our office, and as well as the Conservation Commission, which was a really great fit. They did a lot together, so that was good. And this year, we just have it in ours. So we work with Bridgewater State. They put a posting up for us, send us some students that are grad students specifically, and it started because David was an intern, and he's just paying it forward, which I think is great.
That is great.
So I think it's
my alma mater, too.
Oh, really, Bridgewater? So it's super beneficial to the town, because as you all know, and everybody in this town knows, there's so much going on with Munimod, all the changes that's brought. Like, that's just a whole slew of new work, because now there's so much that can be done, so everyone's bustling around. I am relying on Nicole, my intern right now. She's helping me kind of bolster our HR. So right now, we're bolstering our HR and making an actual department eventually. But right now, I have her, she's going to look at all of our job descriptions that I've slowly but surely been updating to an appropriate format. Everything's the same. I like continuity. I've had her look through our policies. Do we have duplicates? Do we have outdated things? Is there something missing? She has an HR background a little bit, so I've definitely tailored the projects to suit her, and that obviously helps. If they're interested, that obviously.
We had 2 Bridgewater interns, probably around 2014, 13, 14, or 14, 15. We also had one from Boston University, and the 2 from Bridgewater were paid a small amount. The one from Boston University, all we did was pay her, if you will, an allowance of $25 a day for gas and lunch, and she mapped all the outfalls for our stormwater project. It was part of her master's program, so we were extremely fortunate to get her.
I think it's a great thing. You do a little bit of good for them, and they do a lot of good for the town.
Good
So,
experience for them,
You know,
too.
if you have the space, I know you're struggling with that right now, aren't we all?
But we're gonna expand.
I know. We're building an attic for storage. And I'm like, can we build an office up there? So, yeah, we've gotten great stuff out of it. I mean, just the gamut.
What's the population of West
In West
Bridgewater?
Bridgewater, 7,100. We just passed 7,000.
Oh my God,
So you're about
we're
this-
bigger than
You're bigger than
Oh,
us,
okay.
I know.
I do have,
Just-
I
go ahead.
just have one quick last question. You seem to have a personality in the likeness of myself. You're a very nice, positive person.
you.
You should have said that. I'm not sure we can handle 2 of you.
Is when the situation arises, because we can't always be nice, because sometimes we need to bring the hammer
Yes.
down. Is there another side to you that we're not seeing?
Well, I'm a mom,
Can you?
so-
Yeah, so you can be.
Yeah, I mean, I always am professional about it, and not that I could be more assertive, but sometimes people don't know when I'm serious, because I am nice, like, they don't get it.
Yeah.
But I would say, yes, I can turn on listen, you're not doing this. I also,
Sure.
you know, for employees, there's methods to basically follow that, to take care of that problem, if it's even a problem. But yes, I'm a mom, so.
I totally
Sometimes.
believe you and accept that.
We're just about out of time for you, but, so the one last question is, tell us in a few words, why we should hire you over anybody else.
I I think I'm a great fit for this town. A lot of similarities, like, I just feel like serendipitous almost, that I've spoken with you on the phone. You know, David Gay, John Duggan has had dealings. Everything I know about Dayton is positive. Everybody says positive things. It's a small community. This is essentially West Bridgewater 25 years ago. And doesn't have all the, coming here on Columbus Day, I'm like, oh, there's no traffic. This is amazing.
We have a rush hour
Very early,
in
it's
the
like 6
afternoon
a.m.
on the bridge.
Oh my goodness.
They're all going
The
to
bridge
24.
is beautiful, by the way, so it
Yeah.
came out really nice.
Only took 50 years.
Yeah. That's the way. Muni
50
mod
of your
fixes
years,
that.
Selectman Goulart.
But I think that I just have a lot of energy, a lot of positivity. I appreciate everything that you've done so up to this point. You seem very, well, you said it, you're progressive, and I really feed off of that energy. I don't want to just be a bump on a log. I want to get things done and see it, a tangible product that we can all be proud of, and, you know, make Dayton the best that it can possibly be. And I think I'm your gal.
Thank you.
I'm gonna watch this video and be like, ah.
I said that. Do you have anything else, Chairman Taylor?
No, I don't. But it's very nice to meet you, like I said.
I know we're out of time. Do I have a
Oh.
minute for questions?
Yeah, I was
Oh,
going
yeah.
to, yes.
We don't answer questions.
So how does your budget process currently work? I know FinCom is your, you know, they provide the budget, but are you guys meeting with departments and?
Well, it's not been as strong as, and I was a CFO for many, many years. And so I think, correct me if you guys think I'm wrong, but I think the finance committee has driven the budget more than the selectmen.
That's true.
And I think that my vision for it is this, it's the selectmen's budget, and the selectmen should be working with the department heads to develop that budget. So when we put the warrant together, we're supporting what's on that warrant.
Right.
And then it goes to the finance committee for their recommendations, but the finance committee here is very strong. And I like that, but I think we need to be strong and to make sure we're,
And they can just make the recommendations off of what the
Yeah,
board with the
right.
town
Right.
administrator has prepared in consultation with.
but that would be, I mean, again, as the town administrator would be the one to head that whole budget
Right,
process.
right, exactly. I was
Having
just-
worn both the hats over the years,
Have I worn both the hats?
having worn
Oh,
both
I-
hats over the years, the reason why the finance committee is a strong finance committee is because it's not appointed by the Board of Selectmen. It's appointed by the moderator, and it's every year. They're not multiple year
Right.
terms. We have had a very stable finance committee. I had seniority, but the gentleman that has chaired this committee practically since day one has chaired it.
Wow.
And he was a driving force to get a town administrator. The other thing I will say is that we have people on that finance committee who really understand municipal finance. And the process that has been around since I was appointed, which I think was around 2003, town accountant sends out all the notices, says by January, whatever, I need info. So she puts it all together, and we end up with the first draft, and it goes out to the board, and we have a chance to look at it, department heads have a chance to look at it. Board of Selectmen schedules meetings, or they have, it depends on the board, it depends on the makeup of the board. One board said, we gotta have all these meetings to do all these things, and then the finance committee met with all the departments, so there was a duplication, so they
Yeah.
tried to put, but the whole thing is, if you will, the actual paperwork, the town accountant does a lot of that, or most of it, and she's the one that comes to the board and says, the department of such and such hasn't sent their budget in yet, so that this board has to say,
Wow.
get your budget in, or you're gonna get either left out or the same as last year. But anyhow, yeah, and I think over the past, well, I came back to the board in 15, and at that point in time, the person who got elected in April of 15 resigned in July. We had a special election, I came back in September. So there was like that disjointedness, because we had, you know, one come and one go, and another one come back. Tonight, what happened, the finance committee was reviewing the warrant that we just put together, because they didn't have a chance to meet, but we had deadlines to meet, so, you know, but anyhow.
And so you see that the town administrator would be putting together a budget in consultation with the three of you, making the cuts if necessary, and then sending a balanced budget to the finance committee for their review and eventual submittal to the town meeting. Okay.
That's what we said.
Absolutely.
So I think I've asked you this, but how does the Board of Selectmen envision notifying the town employees and otherwise, so residents as well, of your selected candidate? Is it a department head meeting?
Well, we'll do it a lot of different ways. We have a town meeting, special town meeting coming up in a couple weeks.
Right, October 26th, right? Same day
It-
as
it would- We're hoping that we can introduce the new
That's why
town.
David can't come.
Yeah.
Jack.
We
So,
figured it
yeah.
out.
Well, what's that day for you?
A town meeting as well, and David is there. But he has another commitment as well for the
But we
diocese.
decided they've been hogging.
Well, I guess that, the ideal thing was to introduce the new town administrator at the town meeting, but we'll see how that
But
goes.
we have, we have a mass emailing list with with like 500 or 600 people. We have
Of your
Facebook. Yeah.
Oh, I love that.
We have Facebook. We have the new
I've been
website.
following your Facebook. It's very.
We'll
very
get, you wouldn't be
I think it's
flying under the
important.
radar.
I think it's important to do a personal introduction
Yeah,
though, because
absolutely.
people need to see the personality of the person we're
I
hiring. so.
agree.
We just appointed our fire chief,
I
because
saw.
with all the problems we had 2 interims, acting fire chiefs, I should say, and we just, a week ago, actually, he took his oath of office and just got through that whole process, so.
And we're gonna appoint a fire chief. Originally.
Is your chief a strong chief?
Strong chief.
Yeah, so's ours.
Do you have civil service or police? No. I read that there was funding included in the town